Welcome to the Provider's Report, where we delve into the world of value-based healthcare. Our mission is to empower healthcare providers with the knowledge and tools they need to deliver exceptional patient care. Each episode, we explore best practices, innovative strategies, and real-world examples of how to achieve the highest standards in patient communication and outcomes. Join us as we transform the future of healthcare, one conversation at a time.
Hey guys, welcome to Better Doctor Project, where we interview healthcare providers to tap into their experiences so we can turn our challenges into our biggest strengths. We hope today's episode inspires you to take that next step to become who you want to be in practice. I'm Dr. Beck.
And I'm Dr. Mack.
Let's get started.
Hey guys, Dr. Mack here. We're so excited you're joining us today for this really important topic, smoking cessation. I know it's not exactly the most comfortable conversation to have, but let's think about this whole process for a second. So patient comes in and obviously they've filled out the 70 million hours worth of paperwork. And of course, there's at least one question on there about whether or not they smoke. What exactly do you do with that information? Do you just check and make sure that the patient filled it out? Does it matter what they checked? Or do you only look at it if it's related to their chief complaint? Maybe if you're looking at them and you're a pulmonologist, right? Or a respiratory therapist of some kind. Maybe a general practitioner. But what if you are just looking at them for low back pain or finger pain or something completely unrelated to smoking? The fact is, smoking is one of the top leading causes of death in the United States. That means this greatly impacts all of our patients' lives. In addition, sometimes smoking can increase things like anxiety or pain and become a central nervous system stimulant. So really, it affects all of our patients. Thus, it's absolutely vital that we take 30 seconds, 2 minutes, however long it takes, although it's not very long, to address this with our patients, figure out where they are and whether or not they're interested in smoking cessation. It doesn't take very long, and we're going to make it easy for you. Today, we're going to be talking about how to empower patients to make realistic goals in relation to smoking cessation. We're going to talk about when and how to even bring this topic up, and fun aspects like how humor can be an important tool in the cessation discussion. And in this episode, we discuss how to read the patient's willingness to make that lifestyle change. We've got all the resources you need to help patients quit smoking. So to help our patients quit their bad habits, and help us quit our old habits and start really great, new, proactive ones, we've got Dr. Sean Neff back again with us on Better Doctor Project to discuss how to positively address smoking cessation. Let's hit it.
All right. Hello, Dr. Neff. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So I'm really excited about today's conversation, and we're thrilled to have you back. As most of our listeners know, we had you literally for 3 previous episodes already this season because you're obviously great and can talk obviously. And because you can talk about so many important topics that are so relevant in today's culture of healthcare. And tonight we're talking about one of my favorite things that I ever learned from you during my time in the VA. And that is how to talk to our patients about smoking cessation. We all know that obviously it's a heavy topic. It can be sometimes uncomfortable, but it's a really important one. And as I was discussing with you earlier, when we decide to talk about smoking, it's not so much that in that moment we want them to say, I'm going to quit today. Because quitting smoking is really hard. But if we can get someone to cut back 25%, 50%, or even just hear it for the 6th time, and that might be the time that it sticks, that alone is valuable. So today I want to talk about how we can do this, why it's uncomfortable, how we can make it more comfortable, and how to do it efficiently, to be honest. So to start, why do you think that this is such a tough topic?
Well, I think that, any time that you're doing something that doesn't necessarily make sense, and it doesn't make sense, there's that cognitive dissonance between your belief and your action. You're going to be a little defensive about it. So those things like, you need to lose weight, or, stop smoking crack. People know those things are bad, So I think they have a tendency to be a little bit defensive about them.
Yeah. Why do you think a provider, even though they know that their patient smokes, why would they be hesitant to bring up this topic too?
Because defensive people can sometimes, be combative. This is an awkward conversation. It's not one, generally if it's done wrong where the patient's like, that guy was awesome. So it can kind of affect the doctor-patient relationship. And I think people in general try to avoid awkward conversations, especially if you've had ones before and you know the path that it takes.
I think a lot of providers, of course, have a lot to go over that first visit, especially with a new patient. And I think oftentimes in private practice too, of course, you want to make a good impression regardless of where you work with that patient, that initial visit, that new patient. When you're in a hospital setting, or if you're the only physician that they're going to see in your specialty, you kind of might be more focused on getting in there and just getting the job done. Or maybe there's still that need to appeal to the patient. But I know in private practice, there's a lot of focus on that, making sure that you're still the provider that they choose, as opposed to someone down the street, right? So that new patient visit can be really, really important. And I'm curious, since this is an awkward conversation sometimes, is it something that you would approach with a brand new patient, or is it something you'd wait and do later on or at a re-exam? When do you approach this subject?
I always approach it the first visit every time. I think part of it's just the flow of how I do things, and that's when I'm taking, their full history. That's when I'm taking their social history. So that's when they're telling me that they smoke. So, circling back to it in a few weeks seems awkward. Normally I just take it right then and do that. And I did when I was in private practice as well. So, it's, one of the top leading causes of preventable death in the United States. So, we should deal with it as quickly as we can. Like Rebecca said, the likelihood of them saying, oh my goodness, I had no idea they're bad for me, I'm stopping right now. That's never happened in my 20 years of practice almost. My batting average for making people quit smoking immediately is not great, but at least broaching the conversation and planting the seeds, hopefully, that lead to them cutting back or quitting in the future.
And just to kind of piggyback off of that, so I also do all of mine on the first visit, but in private practice, you also, especially in a group practice like you and I are in, Dr. Mack, I feel like a lot of times I'm having to do it with patients that I never had a first visit with, especially if I'm covering for somebody else. And so when it happens with them, I'm looking for it like as a sign. So like if my male patient is emptying out his pockets and happens to pull out a pack, or if I see them pull out a lighter, or if I can actually just smell the cigarettes, or like I'm looking for like those little cues with those kinds of patients. Otherwise, on a new patient visit, I think the review of systems is definitely the time to do it. And I kind of like segue really easily into it. They've already filled out, at my office anyways, we have electronic paperwork. So I can actually review their chart before I even see them face to face and see that they've marked that they're a smoker. So I'm already kind of like thinking, okay, I'm going to have to bring this up, right? But even if it's not on there and there is another sign that they're doing it, that's still another opportunity to bring it up, I feel like. I think so far, if I think of my batting average, I think I've had more success with the random patient I happen to see because I'm covering than a brand new patient, for whatever reason. Like, I think it's more random. I think they're not expecting it from me because they've never seen me before. I don't know. I think it's just a weird random dynamic, but that's honestly when I have had the best track record with someone either quitting fully or minimizing how much they smoke, which is kind of interesting.
I was wondering that too. Like at a new patient visit, I think a lot of new patients come in with some expectations, whether it's based on doctors they've seen before or just their own expectations. And sometimes this has to do with weight. Like they come in like, I know my doctor's going to tell me to lose weight. I even have them say that to me. Like, I know you're going to tell me my low back pain is because of my weight. Actually, no, and I would imagine the same sometimes happens with smoking, that they expect that you're going to bring it up. How do you guys handle those situations when they pop up? if they're like immediately defensive or already defensive?
For me, I've only had that happen a handful of times. Like sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I've been told that before. But usually I'm already saying something like, hey, I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you this, but like, so I kind of try to spin it and make it, I almost try to put a little humor in it that way because I know that they know it's bad for them. Or I'll say like, hey, I really hope another healthcare provider has told you this, but did you know? And then that kind of gets a laugh out of them. And then it makes that situation less negative. Like, okay, I don't care that this is the seventh time I've heard this. And if you look at a lot of research on how long it takes to break a habit, make a habit, or like truly make a lifestyle change, you have to hear, I think the magical number is what, 7 times? You have to hear something a certain number of times before, you really make it stick. And so for me, it sounds kind of savage, but I personally don't care if it's the 21st time they've heard it. Like maybe that's the time that they needed it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I definitely try to use humor with it. I'll tell them that, they're not a good source of vitamin C and they're only a good source of fiber if they actually swallow them. And sometimes they're like, what? And I'm like, they're not healthy. Like there's nothing redeemable about them. And then I try to tie it back to things that are important to them. I think the idea of your own death is somewhat of an abstraction, at least to me. I assume to everybody else. If you've recently seen someone your age pass away from something, I think that drives it home a little bit more. But just on a regular Tuesday, the fact that I'll cease to be is kind of abstract. So telling me that something's going to kill me doesn't really make sense. So I try to tie it back to, why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Smoking increases, carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide levels, decreases oxygen levels in your blood. That's going to slow healing. Nicotine's a pain enhancer. People who use nicotine have more pain. And as a chiropractor, I'm mostly seeing people for pain, but I think regardless, when you see somebody who has COPD and you're like, oh, I'm glad you're still smoking. Kind of the absurdity of it, I think helps make sense sometimes when they can look and see that it is a little crazy to continue smoking when we know how bad it is for you.
And I'm honestly really honest with them too. Like I will literally tell them, I know that this is so hard to do. I know that quitting anything is tough. And this is one of the hardest things to actually quit. And I will be super honest with them and say that, which is why I think providing alternatives to quitting is important too. So I know we've kind of touched on a couple of those, Dr. Neff, but in your mind, if someone is not willing to quit, what are some alternatives that you like to provide for them?
Quitting. No.
Well, obviously that in a dream case scenario.
The evidence on cutting back is actually somewhat mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And that generally as you decrease the number of cigarettes that you smoke them more deeply and passionately. So there's some evidence that cutting back might not be quite as helpful as we would hope when it's mild to moderately done. I've even talked with people about potentially vaping in Europe. They view vaping as a way to help quit smoking. Obviously, knowing the provenance of your vaping material, I think, is important. There's certain countries that put lead in baby toys, so who knows what comes in vape juice from certain countries. Those things, but generally I just try to talk to people about quitting. And I think the main thing to drive home is that when you're quitting anything, it's just a decision that you make every day to not do that. So, can you go a half hour without a cigarette? Well, sure. Can you go today without one? Sure. Okay, then just do that again tomorrow. And then you build momentum. You get a streak going and you don't want to blow that streak. And I think that's the case with anything. If you were like, you can never have a cookie again for the rest of your life, you'd be like, that's a really long time, because I'm never going to die. That's never a cookie for eternity. Whereas if you said, like, can you not eat a cookie today? Sure, I cannot eat a cookie today. Like I said, forever is a big abstraction, just like death. So, what's the saying? What's the best way to eat an elephant? Right, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's super true.
Essentially, you're giving them SMART goals. Basically, you're giving them a timeline and you're giving them a tangible, broken down, achievable goal, just like we would for any other part of healthcare.
Yep.
That makes sense. And I think no matter what the goal is, there are going to always be, weak moments or times with setback. And those are the times we usually lean on, hopefully, your support system and the team around you. And sometimes I think that leaning on your family, your friends, etc., can be really helpful if they are a positive influence in your life. And sometimes it can be really drastically negative or toxic if you have someone who's an enabler in your life. So what are some ways you explore who their support team is if they have one, or who their enabling team is if they have one, and how do you encourage or discourage those relationships? And do you even go down that path?
I don't get as much into that with smoking cessation. I think it's certainly something that you start to delve into more when you're dealing with suicidality. But certainly, I mean, we've talked about it before, and a lot of times when you're talking to a patient, you're telling them, this is bad for you, beyond the fact that it's going to kill you, it's going to kill you slowly and horribly. And, you're going to hurt more while you're doing that. And they'll say, well, I tried to quit, but my wife smokes, or I tried to quit, but my husband smokes in the house. And I tell them, well, you guys have to talk, and find a path forward. But at the same time, what other people do, you can't let that control what you do. So find some sort of compromise. Maybe they can not smoke in the house. Maybe they don't smoke in the car.
So basically, you're also empowering them to realize that they are the only ones who make the decisions in their life also.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, they'll say, like, well, I quit smoking, but then my wife kept smoking. So then I started smoking too, because of whatever reason, like, oh, that'll show her, like.
So when that happens and they have those setbacks, right, whatever the case may be, do you have another discussion with them about it if they've already had one? Do you circle back?
Yeah, I think if you need to, and when people do quit, I try to make sure to congratulate them. Like, that's awesome, fantastic,
celebrating wins.
Yeah, exactly. So I think letting them know in advance that relapse is a thing. Like, you're not going to be perfect. So you make the decision every day to not do it. So if you mess up tomorrow, it doesn't mean you have to keep doing that forever. Just start again clean the day after. And I think that's valuable, that kind of planning the fact that you're not perfect and forgiving yourself for it in advance, so that it doesn't completely derail you. Because I think sometimes, we make these promises to ourselves, and then when you break that promise, then you're off the wagon, and you don't recover. You just continue to do that. You just try to make your belief match your action, instead of making your action match your belief or your knowledge.
I think that's one of the most important pieces of advice and realization in this, because that's, I think, where I see people derail all the time, not just with smoking, with any habit, right? With food, with literally anything, exercise, we see it all the time. So I think setting those expectations, actually, like we talked about in some of our other episodes with you, Dr. Neff, setting those expectations from the beginning, good and, seemingly negative, but just part of the road to recovery. It's not a straight line.
Yeah, and I always let them know about the different things that are available to help. There's patches, there's gum, you know, there's antidepressants. There's all these medications that we have now that have been shown to help people
Mm-hmm.
quit smoking and help minimize cravings and help increase their compliance on that. And sometimes it just takes somebody driving home the reality of it. Rebecca, you probably remember, I think I've talked with you about it before, that I had a patient who was, I don't know, 3 or 4 pack a day smoker. She just smoked all the time when I was in private practice. And her husband smoked, and I convinced him to quit smoking, and she just wouldn't quit. And I talked to her primary care, and I helped her get the patches, and she didn't use them, and she just kept smoking. And she kept telling me, I just can't do it. It's too hard. I try to cut back, and then I smoke even more. And then her son tragically developed brain cancer. And he actually passed away. But as soon as he got the diagnosis, she quit cold turkey,
Wow.
immediately stopped, and never smoked again. So, obviously she always had that ability.
Mm-hmm.
It just sometimes takes, a push or a pull to get people there. That's something that I'll sometimes talk with patients about, and I'll say, yeah, I've been meaning to quit. And I'm like, okay, well, how many cigarettes do you have left in that pack? And said, well, how about if that's just your last pack, or even better yet, just throw that pack away. You're done. Like, just don't buy anymore. Like you said, when they come in and empty their stuff out, I'll even
Mm-hmm.
sometimes say, yeah, go ahead and put your keys and your glasses here. You can put your cigarettes right there in the garbage can.
Yeah.
They don't. They never have.
I know, I'm waiting for the one time they actually put it in the trash, but I think like we've mentioned, bringing humor into it is just so valuable, because the chances are they've heard this before, and sometimes it just takes that time, or they need to hear it from somebody that spins the perspective a little bit. um, you kind of mentioned, obviously, with this patient, it was a family thing that really led her to quit, because her son mattered that much to her. I actually have a patient right now. I just found out a couple weeks ago she's starting to quit. And the only reason she's doing it is because she's having infertility issues. And her doctor is literally telling her that we cannot start treatment until you have literally fully quit smoking. And she has never in her life wanted to quit. She's never tried. She's never, even really thought about it. And so that is all it took for her. And she's realizing, and she went straight cold turkey too. And she's realizing she always had it in her now, but she knows that this matters so much to her that it was finally time to make that move.
The biggest part with tobacco, especially when you smoke it, is that it's a psychological addiction,
Mm-hmm.
more so than the physical dependency on the nicotine.
Yeah.
That passes relatively quickly, and I talk with patients about that. I think it's important when you're first broaching the subject to not be preachy and not talk down to them. Because, like I said, they already know it's not healthy. But they've had to align their beliefs to their action, because they weren't able to align their action to their beliefs. And when you start to try and change beliefs, evidence doesn't usually do that. So you have to bring them around more slowly, and then I normally get into the physical addiction will be gone in 2 or 3 days. After that, it's a battle of will between you and a paper tube stuffed with dried leaves. And, I think you can win that. And, yeah, like I said, I don't know. I've never had a person quit immediately upon me telling them that, but I hope that people have quit. I know some people have. And, like I said, I always celebrate it when they do. It's super exciting for me, just like when people, quit drinking.
Yes.
I think there are complicated emotions surrounding every possible kind of addiction, but I know that anxiety and depression are two of the most prominent, I think, that go along with that. I'm assuming you see these often, and I'm wondering if you bring up those topics with the smoking cessation conversation. Do you even address those? And how does that conversation change if you notice those are present?
Well, a lot of times they'll say, well, I know I should quit, but I need them to calm me down. And then, we have a talk about the fact that nicotine's a central nervous system stimulant and is unlikely to do anything to calm you down. The calming effect that you have is because you're not anxious about you getting your fix. That anxiety is driven by withdrawal. So, um, I normally try to talk about that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, depression, anxiety are tied in with all sorts of addictions and all sorts of other health problems, really.
Do you refer out as well for like any kind of psychiatric co-management at the same time, or do you wait and do that later on?
If they have depression and anxiety, normally, um, at least with my patient base, they're normally already seeing someone. And if they're not, I'm already trying to guide them that way because of the depression and anxiety. We have a very well developed smoking cessation program in the VA. So a lot of times I just try to refer them to that. Sometimes they say no. A lot of times they say yes. Some of the times that they say yes, they don't show up. But if they don't, then I reoffer it to them again later because normally they'll have a reason why they couldn't make it that time. And so I'll say, oh, well, not a problem then. I'll put another order in, and maybe you can get there this time. That program takes in a counseling approach as well as a medication assisted approach. We also have substance use disorder programs as well outside of tobacco, and those also run very heavily mental health component to them. But yeah, I think building a team, no matter what you're trying to do with your patient, I think it is vital. And in just about every town and city, whatever hospital is there, or whatever health system you have, normally will have smoking cessation programs that are normally free to the public. They use it as a public health outreach and honestly kind of as a loss leader to draw people into their facilities. The more often people go to a facility, the more comfortable they feel with it, the more likely they are to go when they need to go spend a bunch of money. So, if that's where you went for your smoking cessation class, that's probably where you're going to get surgery or have a baby. That's the hospital you're comfortable with. So, reach out to your hospital, check their website, reach out to your local public health people. They have these programs that exist and, like I said, are normally free. So
That's
utilize these resources. You don't have to be everything to them. You just have to broach the subject and then help them get where they need to be.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's perfect. Well, again, the biggest reason I wanted to have this discussion today is because I still see so many people avoiding it. Whether you're a nurse, PA, a primary care physician, a chiropractor, a PT, there's just a lot of fields where it's not really getting addressed. And like I said, my time with you, I learned a million things, let's be honest, but this was one of the biggest takeaways that I have made a change when it comes to my health history, my physical exam. I make sure that this is something I do very often. So I thank you for that. And I really hope our listeners can hear this today and realize how easy and straightforward it is to add it into their regular practice. Because to do this, literally, I don't even know if it would take longer than a minute or two. And the value is unreal.
It is a simple thing to implement.
The thing is that it's simple for you, though. And I think because you're in the VA, you're interacting with people. I think the vast majority of your patients, unfortunately, are struggling with a lot of addiction issues of many different kinds. And so I think it's just more common for you, which is why it's so simple and comfortable. But I think, again, the way I was able to learn from you so quickly, I think everybody just needs to hear this and realize, okay, this is simple. I think I can start to do this too. And if we did it 50 times and one person quits, that's a huge win in my book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had some wonderful mentors, and this is a topic that we've never covered. So I think that's the whole purpose of BDP is we've all had different experiences, different mentoring opportunities, and not all of us have gone through the same experiences. And so our collective experience is so much stronger and ultimately better for the patient. And that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Dr. Neff. It's always a pleasure to have you on the Better Doctor Project.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Wow, guys, I'm so glad you could join us for today's episode. It's Dr. Mack here, and I'm so grateful that you took part in the discussion today on smoking cessation. Taking the time to learn a little bit each day and changing the way you practice can have such a lasting impact on our patients and on us as healthcare providers. In today's episode, we alluded to 2 previous episodes on Better Doctor Project. First, Dr. Beck mentioned celebrating wins. We talked about this in our very first episode, episode 1 with Dr. Sherry McAllister. So if you haven't had a chance to check that one out yet, pop back all the way back to our very first episode and check it out. It has some really valuable information on celebrating wins with your patients and making sure to congratulate them when they achieve milestones related to their treatment as well as in their personal lives. Next, we talked about setting realistic expectations from the very first visit. We talked about this in our 3-part series with Dr. Neff. If you haven't had a chance to check out any of those episodes, check them out now. As always, all of our show notes from today's episode, including all the smoking cessation resources, can be found at our website, betterdoctorproject.com. Click on podcast episodes and click on the episode you'd like to check out. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We loved connecting with you today on this episode of the Better Doctor Project. We can't wait to share our next podcast with you in just 2 weeks. Same time, same place. Until then, pop over to Instagram to follow us at Better Doctor Project or keep up with us at betterdoctorproject.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Provider's Report. We hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. To stay updated with our latest episodes, subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen. For more resources and continuing education opportunities, visit our website. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our patients and truly set a standard for value-based healthcare.